Good evening, sir. International Space Police. I assume you know why we pulled you over? Well, you've been traveling through space pretty fast. A bit too fast, if you ask me. Do I really need to explain why speeding through space is so dangerous? Space travel. What is space travel? Is this space travel? Or is this space travel?
Hey, get out of my space!
The space, also called the cosmos, begins somewhere at an altitude of 50 miles to 62 miles and is described by Wikipedia as the expanse between celestial bodies. Space travel, or space exploration, describes the journey or transportation through this space. Have you now understood what space travel is? Then let's move on to the history. Our journey begins in 1944 in Germany. Europe is at war and the Nazis are searching for the next deadly superweapon. In Peenemünde on the island of Usedom stands Europe's largest military research center at the time. And under the leadership of Wernher von Braun, the Germans are working, sometimes more, sometimes less successfully, on rocket technology. Or, as Wernher von Braun described it,
the rocket worked perfectly except for landing on the wrong planet.
On 20th of June, one of the so-called A4 rockets reaches the 62 miles mark for the first time.
Oh, poop.
Making it the first man-made object to cross the boundary of space. However, the A4 rockets also caused so much damage during the war that the Americans became aware of the technology. And after the occupation of Germany, interned Wernher von Braun, who must have felt like a demigod by now, as well as several other German rocket scientists, resulting in this badass footage of a von Braun who knows that the Americans can't touch him for his war crimes because he possesses too much valuable knowledge. In the following years, the space race begins between the two superpowers, the USA and the Soviet Union. The main victims are various animals that had to serve as test subjects. On the 20th of February 1947, fruit flies are launched into space with a V2 rocket to test the effects of radiation, making these fruit flies the first animals in space. They reach an altitude of 105 miles and actually survive the flight. In the following years, the USA conducts a series of tests on primates, launching monkeys, by the way all named Albert, into space year after year. Albert I dies in 1948, likely from asphyxiation before the launch, as he is stuffed with morphine in an overly cramped capsule. Albert II, however, manages to become the first mammal in space in 1949, reaching an altitude of 82 miles, which unfortunately doesn't mean a shit for him since he is a monkey and the parachutes fail upon return to Earth. Neither Albert III or Albert IV survived the tests, as in 1949 the capsule explodes at just 9 miles altitude and in 1950 the parachutes fail again, bringing the Albert test series to an extremely successful conclusion. The realization, if we are going to send human up there, we still need to work on the parachute systems. In the following years the Soviets gained the upper hand in the space race, and in 1957 sent Sputnik 1, the first man-made satellite, into space, where it remained for 92 days before burning up. Sputnik 2 was also sent into space in 1957, along with the dog Laika, a street dog from Moscow. Laika's return to Earth was never planned. The goal was simply to see how long she would survive, and I honestly don't see anything objectionable about that. Laika may have died just a few hours after launch due to overheating and stress, but she lives on in our hearts. And in this wonderful statue that was built for her in 2008. And the money for the parachute systems could be saved as well in this case, making the missions another complete success. After that, the Soviet Union launched the lunar missions, with Lunik 2 in 1959 becoming the first man-made object to crash onto the surface of the moon. Lunik 3, also in 1959, managed to take the first photos of the backside of the moon with an image quality about as good as today's security cams. We have reached 1960 and there is absolutely no signs of the American in-space exploration, while the Soviets keep doing their thing. With the dogs Belka and Strelka, two living beings made it back to Earth alive for the first time. At least if we don't count the fruit flies from 1947. Belka and Strelka, along with a few mice, rats and flies, orbited the Earth for a day and then returned in best mood. After the flight, Strelka even gave birth to 6 puppies, one of which was gifted to Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of the US president. Perhaps this provoked Kennedy so much that he made space exploration one of the main priorities of the next decade, and in 1961, during a congressional, he announced the goal of landing a person on the moon within the following decade.
Before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
And bringing them back as well, which is of course not a given. And that brings us to Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space on April 12, 1961. He orbited the Earth once in 108 minutes and then landed in a completely different location than initially calculated, in a field in the Volga region, where he scared a woman and a little girl nearly to death. They initially thought he was an alien. After years of lagging behind, the Americans, partly due to Kennedy's speech, realized that they are quite far behind in the space race, and in 1961 firstly launched the chimpanzee Ham into space. I can't tell you why he's called Ham either. Who survives the journey and is rewarded with an apple and an orange. Man, is it Christmas again. And the astronaut Alan Shepard, who so becomes the first American in space. But after that, it's just the Soviet Union again. With Vostok 3 and 4, there are 2 people in space at the same time. With Vostok 6 and Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman goes to space. In 1965, Alexei Leonov becomes the first person to exit a spacecraft, and with the Luna 9 probe, the first soft landing on another celestial body is achieved. In this case... The following years mark the era of the famous Apollo missions, reaching their absolute peak on July 21st, 1969, with the landing on the moon. Under the leadership of Werner von Braun, yes, it's the German guy again, one of the most powerful rockets ever built is created, the Saturn V. The Saturn V is a true masterpiece, and from Apollo 8 on December 21st, 1968, with the famous Christmas message from space,
God bless all of you.
all subsequent moon missions are conducted exclusively with this rocket. 120 yard tall, diameter of 11 yard and speeds of over 6 miles per second. And with that, the great moment has finally arrived. On July 16, 2024, the famous Apollo 11 mission launches. And on July 21st...
Excuse me? That's not correct at all. The famous Apollo 11 mission launched on July 16, 1969.
Watch out what you're saying, you little dickhead. And on July 21st, Neil Armstrong becomes the first human to set foot on the moon and speaks the famous words,
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
During the following Apollo missions, after Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, 10 more astronauts would walk on the moon. All of them carry out their missions with the highest professionalism.
Hippity hoppity, hippity hoppity, hippity hopping over hill and dale.
The moon is now fully played through, and after 1972 there have been no more manned moon missions till this day. The Soviet Union has long since refocused on other objects, achieving its first soft landing on another planet in 1970, the Venus, a small planet with temperatures ranging from 750 to 932 degrees Fahrenheit and a surface pressure 90 times that of Earth. In 1973, a US spacecraft makes its first flyby of one of the outer planets of the solar system, the Jupiter. The golden years of manned space flights are over, and in the following decades the focus shifts to building space stations and launching probes to explore the solar system. This was largely made possible by NASA's Space Shuttle program, which aimed to enable regular, cost-effective space flights, because space missions cost a shitload of money. However, the program was overshadowed by 2 major tragedies. The Challenger disaster in 1986, when the crewed shuttle exploded 73 seconds after launch, and the Columbia disaster in 2003, when the shuttle broke apart upon re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere after a 2-week flight. The next truly noteworthy achievement is the Voyager 1, a NASA spacecraft launched in 1977. It initially flew by the planets Saturn and Jupiter, utilizing the swing-by technique flung forward like a disco thrower by the planet's gravity. Then on August 25th in 2012, it became the first human-made object to enter interstellar space. The interstellar space. This area is, so to speak, the desert of our galaxy, as it is a completely no man's land, far away from all planets and filled with nothing but hydrogen, helium and dirt. Hello, may I please observe the stars behind you? Interstellar space gives you the middle finger for that, because its gas and dust may look nice in pictures, but they block the view of the really interesting things. Back to Voyager 1. It is the farthest object from Earth ever built by humans and continues to send data back to Earth regularly, currently from a distance of about 15.2 billion miles. That sounds like an incredibly amount, and it is indeed a lot, but it is the perfect time to remind ourselves of what a tiny pile of crap we really are. Because Voyager 1 has traveled a distance of only 0.0025 light years. The Milky Way, in which we reside, has a diameter of about 100,000 light years. If we map these 100,000 light years onto the distance of Berlin to Sydney, which is 9,941 miles, then Voyager 1 has so far traveled an impressive 12.5 inches. My urge to illustrate how big the universe is should in no way diminish the achievements of Voyager 1. I won't hear a word against it. And to emphasize this, let me show you these Reddit comments.
This shit was made in the 70s. NASA's amazeball. Give them more money.
The fact that they still manage two-way radio communication at that distance is insane.
Yeah, and if Snoop Dogg says that. Since the Cold War ended, the frequency of major events in space exploration has decreased somewhat. And when you put it that way, it's a bit sad that much of the motivation for something so great stemmed from a war between two nations and a lot of ego. But I suppose that's just how we humans are. I find it all the more refreshing that there are more and more private space companies shaking things up. And yes, I have every reason to see this as refreshing, because I didn't acquire all this knowledge for this video from the internet, I experienced it all. All the years. Everything. And so billionaires like Elon Musk are now getting involved in space exploration, with SpaceX building their own rockets. Now, while Elon Musk often talks about colonizing Mars and nuking it and so on, SpaceX hasn't really achieved anything significant in that direction yet. However, private companies like SpaceX are contributing to making space travel much more cost-effective and sustainable in the future, which promises a bright future, maybe. I have no idea. But the ones delivering when it comes to Mars are NASA, which is sending all sorts of rovers and even helicopters to the Red Planet. On February 19th, 2021, the Perseverance rover and its small helicopter Ingenuity successfully landed on Mars and delivered absolutely mind-blowing video footage. And that brings us to the most important event ever, the James Webb Space Telescope, which launched in 2021 and has been orbiting the Lagrange Point L2, located 930,000 miles from Earth, since January 24th, 2022. This thing takes absolutely mind-blowing photos, and just imagine if you were to drive into one because you were going too fast and not paying attention, you stupid little dickhead. Son of a bitch. You know, you're really lucky that you met such a calm and understanding policeman like I am. You know, there are others. Some colleagues would pull out their guns now and play around with them to intimidate and... Oh. Oh, hello there. I'm just taking out my space trash. I'll just drop it here with all the monkeys and dogs. That's definitely it for this video. Maybe you have even learned something today that will help you in life. I don't know. But feel free to let me know in the comments what else you would like to see on this channel. And because I spent way too long working on this fire effect just to use it for 5 seconds in this video, I'm going to set myself on fire now. And now, shh, I've got some things to do.